handout, or not really handout, but what we did earlier in the year in regards to shading with ink, right? So we did these 4 techniques, and I'll touch upon those in a bit after I do the colored pencil. So I just have this blue, right? This blue, you can add black and white, but that kind of tends to make things a little more difficult for people. So just like when you're shading with pencil, you want to keep in mind the amount of pressure you're applying when you're coloring, or when you're shading in this case. And I touched upon this a little bit when we did the open font project, right? And I talked about transparency and things looking opaque, right? So just like when we go ahead and do shading with pencil, you want to try and hide the lines that you're creating, so that it's a nice smooth transition. So I'm going from dark over here to light as I go down to the left side of his body over here. So I'm decreasing the amount of pressure as I'm going over to the bottom. So if you notice, when it started shading this, the light is coming from the bottom up because it's lighter up here, or at the bottom of each part of the body's sections. And then it gets darker as you go up it, right? And so that's how I'm kind of shading it, or the lighting, right? So you see the head. So a little bit of black was added on this to make it a little darker, but feel free if you want. Now, some colored pencils, by the way, you can erase. You just have to put a little bit of more effort into trying to shade it or erase it. So if you saw, I was able to erase that section. So there is a possibility of erasing when you're using colored pencil. Just giving you guys that heads up. There are some pencils that you can't, or colored pencils that you can't erase, but most you can. I'm not using any fancy type of colored pencil, by the way. These are just your generic colored pencils that you get in those packs of, like, I don't know, 10, 12 or so, right? And you can also use the eraser. You guys remember how yesterday I showed you how to lighten up the center? You can do the same thing with the eraser and using pencil. If you went too dark, just go ahead and lighten it up in that one section to make it a little lighter. And then some advice. You guys see how there's some blue here on my eraser? If you're going to use this eraser for colored pencils or regular pencil, make sure you clean that off before you move on to the another section, so you don't accidentally smear some blue on it. And remember, the way you clean an eraser is just you erase on a surface, right? And so again, I'm just going along the edges or the body parts, and then adding some value. So remember, when I'm referring to value, what am I referring to? So what's another word for value that we went over when we did shading? Anyone remember? What's another word for value? Come on. Someone's got saturation. No. But it does have a little bit to do with saturation, or how much you put on. Shading. Thank you, Isaac. Yes. Value is in regards to shading, right? The more value you have, the darker the values or the shading is. The less value you have, the less shading there is, right? So again, now I'm doing like the hips area. Again, get pretty dark here on the outside or on the top, and then as I'm going down to the left side of his hips or his pelvic cavity, I'm getting a little lighter down here. Okay? Remember, the amount of pressure you put on it makes a big difference. Start off, I like to start in the dark areas just because I have a heavy hand, right? And then I go in, if I need to make it lighter, I can. And then I'm just going to grab the eraser and lighten it up. Okay? So again, nothing too fancy, just to show kind of where the light is coming from, and also this will help your figures look more 3D and look more rounded, right? Big difference, right, from this to this over here, right? So that's colored pencil. So I was just using the blue and just messing with the amount of pressure I was putting down. and then going in with the eraser and lightening up the areas that need to be a little lighter. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the ink shading. Now, you don't have to use a Sharpie. You can use any regular pen as well when it comes to shading. Now, keep in mind these 4 techniques, right? We did scribbling, we did hatching, we did stippling, and cross hatching. I have 3 of those here. So I have the hatching here, the scribbling, and then the stippling on here. Now this stippling isn't done, so I'm gonna kind of continue on that one. So remember, stippling tends to take the longest, but if done correctly, it looks the best, right? And so some people prefer this just because they like to be a little detailed. If you are not one of those people that likes to be detail oriented, I highly suggest that you probably not do this one, right? Or else you're going to probably be impatient the whole time and kind of rush through it. This is a technique that you definitely don't want to rush through because it is the most noticeable one when you rush through it, right? So I'm just adding more dots or stippling to increase the darkness of that area that I'm working on, right? So the light's coming straight onto my person. That's why the dark side of them is on the right, right? So each limb or each body part starts light on the left and then gets darker on the right. Just like you see the arm, the back, these legs here. So the bottoms of these legs are darker and the tops of them are a little lighter. So that's why I'm making this edge here have more value along it, right? So that's the stippling, right? Not hammering it down, making sure that you don't ruin the tip of your pen or whatever it is that you're using. Okay, so scribbling. Obviously, I'm not done with this. I just want to move on and show you the other techniques, right? So we have stippling, scribbling, right? The more you make, the more scribbles you make, the darker it looks. So keep that in mind. I'm going to make this just a little, have some more scribbles in it. But this one, for the most part, is done in terms of scribbling. Right? The amount or the pen you use does make a difference. For example, this pen on the left, the Sharpie, is much thinner than this regular pen. So you can definitely use this for smaller areas and a bigger pen for bigger areas, right? And each pen does give you a slightly different line, depending on the type of line you want, okay? All right, so that's scribbling. Hatching, remember, are lines that are parallel to one another, right? And they typically go in the same direction, and you just layer them to create the value that you want. I want to make this bottom edge pretty dark because it is the darkest part. And then as you go up the body, the lines get more separated. I'm going to change pen. They get more separated and longer in certain sections just to show that the value is going up. Okay. I'm going to do the last one will be cross hatching. Cross hatching can be a little difficult just because it can get messy just like the scribbling, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do it here. For this one, I'm going to make it look like the light is coming straight onto him. So that means I'm making the sides of his body darker and the center lighter. So I'm going to start with just parallel lines going horizontally, right? Evenly spread out first, like this. Kind of give it like that tiger mark or marks. Tigers tend to have those lines or those stripes, right? And then once I have that layer, remember that the next layer is the opposite direction, in this case being vertical. And again, I'm going to put them fairly close to them or to each other at the edge. And then just keep adding layers to each one And the other key thing to this part is the length of the lines. So not all my lines are the same length. I'm changing them. Some are shorter and some are longer, going towards the center of his limb. Okay. So the shading is nothing fancy in terms of the project, right? I want you to attempt the shading for your project and not just give an outline or have a figure that just has this on it, right? Erase the insides of your figures and then shade them, whether you're using pencil or any other materials, right? Now, keep in mind, this isn't the last time or the first time we're doing shading. We're gonna, a lot of art projects or art in general do have shading on them. That is what kind of makes art a little more alive and makes it pop even more. So it almost looks like webbing, cross-hatching, right? And you see it slowly, that leg starting to look more and more round as opposed to the rest of his body. Okay, so again, these are the 4 different types of ink shading techniques I showed you, right? And then the colored pencil, right? I don't care which shading technique you use, I just care that you're using it when it comes to your project. All right.